Yes, you don't identify as XYZ, but you've felt those feelings, the same feelings that I felt.
Welcome to the B Pod. I am your host, Louis B, and today we are thrilled to have Tom Bertram coming on talking about his experience with identity and equality and the way that we can all change the world in the day-to-day just by being who we are. So thank you for being with us. It's a wonderful conversation. All right, welcome to the B Pod. I'm Louis B, and we are happy to have Tom Bertram here today. Tom, it's wonderful to see you again. I only see you once a week, and I just want to start by saying if it sounds like me and Tom are levitating at all, it's probably true.
Very true.
We just got out of a Tai Chi session, and I guess I'm curious, Tom. Like, you have a very good memory. Do you remember the day that we actually met?
Probably not. I can't say that I know the exact day. It would be sometime when you were in Smith Hall as a resident of mine, living up on the second floor. So, but I don't remember the exact moment, unfortunately. Do you remember the exact moment?
No, but I do remember the circumstance, and I kind of want to start there because I was 2009. In the previous semester, I'd set a lacrosse school record for getting kicked out of the dorms in the shortest amount of time. And so my friend Randy, who you also know, happened to have a room open. So I was like, hey, I'm going to go to Point. So I go to Point, move in with Randy. And obviously in lacrosse, it was the hall director that kicked me out. And then at Stevens Point, my hall director was Tom, who was with me today. And for some reason, you didn't kick us out of the hall. I know there's no ample opportunity. And that's true. I remember there's times where I'm just like, Tom, why don't you kick us out? And you didn't do it. And I'm just curious.
Why would I want to?
I don't know. I'm curious, like, A, why you didn't kick us out, B, why you were doing that position at all, and I forgot C, so let's start there.
Okay. Well, I'll start with B, why I chose to be a hall director. So in high school, I was very big in computers, and my family was big in business. And so I was like, okay, I was going to go to Oshkosh, and I was going to go into management information systems, the computer side of business, and got there. And I lived in the residence hall and got involved in their hall government and became their treasurer. But my assistant hall director that year, his name was John. He was fantastic. And people don't go to college thinking, oh, I could live in the residence halls. I could work in the halls and make a career of it. But through some experiences, just that whole residence hall experience, I realized that I can do this and I could be a part of something great. And so I loved the experience of living in the residence halls, and primarily first and second year students, fresh out of high school, the world is their oyster ultimately, and so they can do anything.
And I've always gotten the sense that it was a pretty natural place for you to be. And I appreciate that because honestly, like, being in college for the first time, 18, 19 years old, it's a tender time in a person's life. There's nothing very natural about it. You know, we're coming from our little small towns or whatever, and just like, bam, clocked in. I just remember, holy shit, that was an anxious time. Mm-hmm. You know, which is probably honestly part of the reason why I was intoxicating myself and getting in trouble all the time.
Fair.
You know?
Absolutely fair.
So it's just to have leadership and people around, and I understand, like, that thing about belonging too, because you show up and it's all strangers, and it's just, I think people throw words like social anxiety around, but it's like, how are you not supposed to be socially anxious if you're just like living in a place with 400
strangers,
18-year-olds? Yeah, and so I mean, yeah, if you're able to see the people there, that's really a gift because it's a weird time for us.
Oh yeah, it's your first time away. Typically, your first time away from your support network, and so you are in charge of your own schedule. So if you want to sleep in all day, you don't have to go to class. You're paying for it, or someone's paying for it. But yeah, it's like you have the freedom to do anything you want. But it's like some people get lost in that because too little structure can throw people off. Too much structure throws people off. So it all depends.
Yeah, right. And I'm kind of curious, why do you think it's kind of funny now that you actually came in and thought you wanted to be like information science or accounting or whatever? Like, because to me it seems pretty obvious now. It's like, yeah, Tom's a person that wants to be working with people.
I didn't know anything about student involvement, student government when I was in when I was in high school. So that's why it's like, okay, so like people is what like gravitate towards, and like it's exciting for me. So like I didn't know any better, and then when I realized like John's like, oh, there's this, like you can get involved and this, you can make a career of this. It's like I can stay on a college campus. I can like it's a night. I kept getting older though, and the students kept staying 18 to 22, and so like that was one thing, a disconnect. But they kept me young. So like I finished being a hall director at the age of 32, and I still felt 18 to 22.
Yeah,
like, and that was fantastic.
Yeah, and then you switched into human resources.
I did.
I'm curious, like, what is the magic that happens there? Like, why do you do that? And I mean, you're at a college campus, so like, why do you do what you do now?
Human resources?
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. And so currently I work with creating contracts for new staff members on campus. Mm-hmm. I set up onboarding. So welcoming, and that's the excitement that people have, is they're starting a new job, and the world is their oyster, back to being a college student, a first or second year college student. And so welcoming the next best employee on campus and saying like, you are going to be working with some amazing people here, hopefully myself included, maybe not directly, but you will get to work with some great people, and like we'll hopefully offer you benefits and some like different things to help you set you up for success and security in your life. Like that's great.
Yeah, and Stevens Point, Wisconsin is a great town. UWSP is a great culture, and I'm grateful that I got to experience UW lacrosse first, because it was different. It really was different. It was this athleticism, this competition, this kind of like preppiness. And it was okay. I was athletic enough. I could do all that stuff. But then I got here, and it was just a breath of fresh air. It felt a little more small town, a little slower, a little more like, hey, and there's reasons behind that culture. It's just kind of interesting here as somebody that, is somewhat responsible for the shaping of that at a different level. And obviously everybody shapes it in their own way. And I love it here. There's a lot here. And if I remember correctly, I think you told me you're from a smaller town, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, as am I, and that's something I think is an interesting dynamic. And it's just different. I'm curious if like how you think about where you come from.
That's an interesting thought. I know as a young individual, like I was kind of like, okay, got it, ready to get out of the small town. I know for me, being a gay male, like that was something that kind of informed some of my decisions. And so the small town feel was a little bit, or the small town aspect was a little bit like, okay, there's not much queer culture in small town. So I was like, got to go find something. And I was still closeted through high school, so it didn't come out until college. And so I think that was one where then found some folks who were a part of that community.
Right.
And so I think it was finding that belonging.
That's where I kind of have mixed feelings now, is that there is this like practical sensibility, where the people where I come from, it's just like they understand things, at a practical like ground level, which is refreshing. Yeah. It's less abstract and everything. But then there's the other part where there's just sort of this like fear and this intolerance, which is, I don't know why.
I guess I would echo that, coming from a very small town. Like it felt like that was the mentality where, and I will say there's always exceptions. So like it feels like stereotypically, and I'm using air quotes, but stereotypically like small towns are so close-minded and intolerant. And it's like, no, that's not the case. There are some people that I think are that way. Yeah. But again, flipping it, big cities, like, oh, big cities are like all open and accepting. I was like, no, there are people that are exactly opposite. So I think, unfortunately, stereotypically, like that's kind of the narrative that is played out. So it's just, but you hear news and like, or there's movies out there like that, there's kind of, people love the fear thing, so it's like, okay, something could happen to you and they'll never know you were gone.
Yeah. And you said before, people love the fear thing, so like where does the fear thing come from with regard to prejudices? Prejudice that you may have experienced, like what do you think is the fear there? Because I believe that there is fear underneath every form of prejudice.
Yeah. I initially want to say fear of losing something. So like if I'm a part of let's say a majority population's like, and life is good for me, and there's someone coming in that's maybe different than me, and if I try to make them equal, like I'm losing something.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't necessarily have to lose something in order to help raise everybody up. So I look at that piece where it's just like, yeah, like why do we care if this person can be happy and successful? Great, good for them. Like I can be happy and successful independently.
One thing I'm curious, it's kind of more of a personal curiosity thing, if you're open for it. Like you mentioned before, you're a gay man in a small town who's closeted until he's out of high school. Like how, like at what point did you know, and what was that like, both to be like maybe not able to fully express yourself in this place, and also do you remember when, you know, you get here and you experience this belonging and just sort of like what it was like to be able to actually express yourself?
I think back to like it was 6th grade, and I remember looking at one of the boys in the class and going, he's attractive. And so like that was, but then growing up knowing that that's wrong, and that's, so it's like that I grew up fairly Catholic. And so like some of these things were,
I just want to quickly interject on that, because that is not, sorry to interrupt, but that's something that a thought that came to me within the last couple of years, is just that time, like, right around, 5th, 6th grade or whatever, when it was just to have that feeling and just to be like, oh, I still remember the first time that it was for me too. It just happened to be a woman. I guess I just had that thought of like, if this would have been for another guy, then I would be homosexual. And the fact is I'm just not, for whatever reason. So I guess I've thought about that it could have, if it just happens in the other way, then there you are.
Yes, so it's like going through puberty. And it's like when you start, like hormones start going. And it's like when you all of a sudden you look and it's like, because the day before I was like, they were just a person. Like the whole class was like, oh, they were just other people. And then all of a sudden, like kind of a flip of a switch, and it's like, okay, I looked at someone and I was like, they're attractive, they just happen to be a male. And so, or like if I could have looked at anybody, it's like, oh, like maybe males or females. So it's like, where am I on the spectrum? It's like, am I more bi? And so at the time I was like, no, like males are very attractive to me. And so, but again, it was like, well, that the feeling is like, that's wrong. And so some of it's internalized, some of it's the messages that I get from the world. And so all high school, like, so that was 6th grade. So there's like, oh, I dare not act on
6
anything.
years, right?
6 years, and having a quasi girlfriend in high school just to try to keep any rumors at bay. This was the late 90s also.
Right.
So mid to late 90s. And so I think that would be, I'd like to believe that it's a little bit, it's a different experience now that I can't really speak to too well. It's one where like in my time it felt like that. Well, and there was one other person in my high school class that I think it was my freshman year was allegedly gay. And got ridiculed to the point that he dropped out.
Holy shit.
And so like, it was like, well, I could take that route, or I could completely closet myself and like act straighter than all straight, or like try to make up for. And again, like obviously it's people, I know I duped some people because they believed it, and when I came out they're like, oh, but then I know there's some people who are like, well, duh, like, so it's hard to tell. But then getting to college and finally it's like coming out to someone my freshman year, and then slowly coming out to more like a family member and then other friends, and they're just like, yep, that it is what it is, like we love you no matter what. And so I don't think there's always the fear of like, if I tell someone this, like they could say, well, you are dead to me.
And you're a guy that talks about family a lot. You've talked to me a lot about your family, and it seems like you really prioritize family. And I've experienced myself. I'm blessed with a wonderful family, and it's like a lot of my security to be who I am in the world comes from that foundation. It's like these people have my back. And I guess, what were you asking yourself those questions about your family? Like, is this going to be like, how is this going to be received or whatever?
Oh gosh, yeah. Oh yeah, I was terrified.
How did you do it? Like, I'm just really curious about that. Like, how did you finally just like jump into the freezing water?
So my sister went to UW Oshkosh with me. She was a year ahead of me. And so as I was coming out to folks, she was one of the first that I told. And so I just was like, okay. I forget even how. She probably would still remember. But it was just like, I came out, but I was terrified. Like, I was shaky. Fast forward 2 years later, I was a junior. I was in a relationship. I had actually been seeing someone for a couple months. And so I sent an email to my mother. And no, just a general letter, sending her an email.
Okay, I thought you were saying.
No, I'm sending a couple paragraph email, then signed me. P.S. By the way, I'm seeing someone. His name is. I couldn't hit send. So like I came out via email. So I was shaking. Like I could not. Like I was about to hit the send button, like the enter button to send it, and I physically like started shaking and I couldn't. So my partner at the time ended up hitting the send button. And so I was like, okay. And then I was like, Mom, can you tell Dad?
That's exactly what I would have done. That's exactly to the T.
And then like I told my brothers. So, but it was one that's my immediate family. But like it was nerve wracking because and so it gets easier. And then I would like to believe that I'm someone who could pass as more straight. So like, but there are some folks that aren't able to. It feels it's similar, and like you then take on like the race piece, and so it's like visually, like there are people who like if someone's going to be mean to someone because of a race, like you can typically see that. Like when it comes to like LGBTQIA plus, like that population, like my population, like they're like some folks like you don't necessarily have to be worried, but then there is sometimes if you're like, I want to wear like a rainbow cape or like something pride related, like you're putting it out there that like this is, I support this, or I am a part of this community, because there's always the ally piece. Like there are a lot of straight allies that or just allies in general. So it's one where it's like it's nice to have support. It's just like you never know, big city, small city, anywhere, like what could happen.
And there's a lot of weird stuff that's happening at like a policy level too.
Yeah, that's sad.
Yeah. And I guess as far as support, I'm curious, and I like having these discussions, with minorities of different types, but it's always kind of like, I guess to me, I just appreciate like having known you and other people that I know that are homosexuals. It's like, you guys are my friends, you know what I mean? You're individual people, It's not like, oh, this is Tommy's my gay friend, this is Jared, he's my gay friend. And I just kind of wonder, there's a part of me, I think a lot about like wokeness per se, and this type of thing. And there's a part of me that's like, what is the line between, being an ally and drawing attention to these types of things versus being a friend and just, kind of where it's like, to address somebody as a gay person or as a black person. I'm just not quite sure. Yeah, I'm just not quite sure about that. I feel sometimes. So what would you say that it means to be an ally? Like what does it mean to be a straight ally, I guess?
I think being there for the systemically non-dominant population, whatever that non-dominant population is, or the minority. And so I think, oh gosh. Well, and so I think about this, like being like a shoulder to cry on, someone to help them feel included, someone to go do things with. But the other piece is like action-wise, and like showing, like if there are discriminatory like legislation that's coming forward, like it can be exhausting for the oppressed to always fight. And so it sometimes takes someone who's a part of the majority population. It's nice for them to be like, well, this isn't my it's if they're like, oh, it's not my fight, it doesn't affect me. Like, yes, it doesn't affect you if this ban is coming your way, or this oppressive legislation is coming your way. It affects me though. And so it's like someone's telling me that I'm wrong and that I'm less than. And so I think as a straight ally, it's like being mindful and being like going out of you're into that level of discomfort and being like, this, I don't identify as XYZ, but I'm a human being and I know that this is wrong. And so I think that to me is it's very powerful when folks who see the injustices and see what's wrong, like what is being done to other folks, and may not fully 100% identify, but still like see that it's wrong and take a stand and say like, well, this may not affect me, but it affects people that I care about, that I truly, really care about, and this is not right for them. Yeah,
and it does. And I mean, it does affect everybody directly, too. Like, I thought about this before. You're talking about family. It's like if you were to not have hit that send button with your mom, and just like kept that degree of veil over who you actually are, it strikes me that it's pretty likely that your relationship with your family wouldn't be what it could have been. There would always be something, you wouldn't be able to be genuine.
Yeah.
And I just think that, you think about, female empowerment in these societies, where women just have no access to education. Like, the society suffers so much. And I think that if anybody is held like that, then it's like people that aren't able to like access their gifts fully or express it. Yeah. And then that is where we all, where we all suffer. And it's just like, some of the stuff that happens, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. Unbelievable, and just like preposterous. Like how can some of the things that people rationalize to be true, how can that be okay? Like, I'm not affecting you. Everybody just wants to live their life and be happy. Like, I was thinking about that. I was like, on the drive over, I was like, what are we going to talk about? And I was like, what if he asks me what I wanted to be as a kid? And I think about that, like, people are like, oh yeah, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, all these things. But it's like, there's always the one where the kid's like, I just want to be happy. Yeah. And the teacher's like, wrong answer. You need to be a professional. It's like, but the parents or the kids are like, no, I want my kid to be happy. Like, they can be anything they want as long as they're happy. And so it's like, I just want to be a happy adult. I was a happy child overall, and I'm a happy, I just want to be happy and like, you do you, baby girl, is something an old former coworker used to say. But so like, you like let me like be me, let me be me, and it's like, I just want to be happy.
Yeah. So a question that I have, and I'm really curious what your reflection on it is, like, so everybody just let everybody be happy, and so there is a point at which I feel like, so then to what degree is it up to us to celebrate other people? You know what I mean? To celebrate, queer folks, or to celebrate minorities and things like that. And I don't necessarily have an opinion on this, but I do kind of, like, a term like anti-racist, I guess. I'm just kind of thinking like, wouldn't anti-racism also be racism in a way? Like, if you're flipping it to the point, I don't know, it seems to me that if you're always existing on one pole or the other, and like, I literally picked up this like ridiculous Christian newspaper just to kind of make fun of it, just because I was like, this looks horrible. And I picked up an article and started reading, and this guy made a point. And he was like earlier on, it was like, hey, don't worry about what we do in our bedrooms. He was like, that was fine, but now if you're asking me to celebrate what you do in your bedrooms, I'm uncomfortable. And I'm just curious about that, to the point at which, I mean, as an ally, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with celebrating other people. I'm just kind of wondering, like, to what degree that could be problematic, just trying to push people too far, I guess, or like
into their level of discomfort to help them grow.
Yeah, right. I don't know. I'm curious.
I think I interacted with some students in my first job as a hall director in Michigan, and like, there was some level of like uncomfortability, or like it felt like prejudice, and it was like, tolerance is the least that we ask of you, or no, like, I forget exactly what it was. Like,
the tolerance is kind of makes it seem like you're just like holding your nose.
You're holding your nose, but that's the lowest level, and so it's like acceptance is higher. Like, oh yeah, I accept you for who you are. I tolerate for you for who you are. Like that. Yeah, you're right. That's a lower thing. But if you're not even at tolerate. Like, and you said, like, that's kind of like holding your nose, like, it just doesn't feel right. But if you don't even tolerate me as a human being, or for XYZ, like that, I feel like we have a fundamental problem.
I think so too. Yeah, I think so too. I guess what I'm kind of curious, I've had some conversation with a friend that is in the education system where it's like sort of a Likert scale or whatever, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and maybe 3 is like equality, you know, and then like 5 would be more of like celebration. I guess to me it seems like equality would be the benchmark. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's like equality should be the lowest level. Like there should be nothing less than equality.
Yeah,
and
but
so,
should there be something more? Like, is there more to achieve than equality?
It's a good question. I don't know. Could equality be the pinnacle? I think that would be great if it truly was, like everyone treated everyone as equal and like with a level of equality.
Yeah, because I think that maybe what's happening is that it's not there right now, and so there has to be like additional actions taken to get there. Because it's like it would be, and maybe it's naive, but it would just be nice to see a world where it didn't matter to the point that it's like, the most qualified person gets to, you know, and this is the way that it goes. But I suppose like in order to get there, there's probably has to be some like policy things or some more kind of force feeding, I guess, before it would become natural.
Yeah, so if I'm 2 steps behind you and we all move 2 steps forward, like I'm still 2 steps behind you.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where like if there's legislation or stuff like policies out there that make me go 3 steps behind you, I would like to also be at that spot where you are.
Yeah, right. And so we're kind of back to that whole scarcity mentality where it's like that's where the fear comes from, is just like, hey, things are changing and I don't know what to expect from the future, which I think, hey, things are changing. You don't know what to expect from the future.
Yeah.
But B, like, okay, if these people come into my resources, then there's less for me, which...
I get 5, you get 1. Well, that means 6 things were given out. Why didn't you get 3 and I get 3?
Yeah.
You already... It's like, oh my gosh, I'm getting your stuff.
Yeah, right, that kind of thing. And one thing I think that our I think with regard to homosexuality in particular, I've found that my generation brought a lot of tolerance to the table. You know, and maybe tolerance is the wrong word, but just like that moved a lot, and it's just interesting for me because I see like my parents' generation maybe just like still pretty uncomfortable with homosexuality as an institution. And my version of that for me, if I'm being honest, is just like, it's just like I struggle a little bit with trans stuff because it's different, because I didn't really grow up with that, you know, and I just, to be honest, I just observe this sort of like the annoyance with like pronoun stuff, you know, and I'm just saying that not to sound like an asshole, but just to be honest, like it makes me a little bit uncomfortable. And I think if I dive in, it's like, A, it's different, B, maybe it seems sort of like, look at me or whatever. But I guess to me, what I just realized recently why I value that is because I'm all about morphing identities. You know what I mean? Like, you be somebody one day, you can be somebody else the next. I think that's great, you know? And so I guess I'm trying to just open up to that and be like, I like to change my identity from situation to situation. And if somebody else wants to do the same, that's awesome. But I do have that that's my level of discomfort. I'm trying to, you know, be open-minded about where it comes from. But I think it is fear of like something I don't understand. It's like, I don't know what it's like to be trans, you know? And man, it's gotta be tough.
And that brings up an interesting thought. I have lots of thoughts. But when you talk, like not knowing what it feels like, I once had a student, a black student, talk to me, and she was like, "You will never know what it's like to be black." And it caught me. It was my first year professionally, and I was just like befuddled. And so I debriefed with my supervisor, and he was like, "Yes, and you will never know what it's like. You can empathize. Like, you have empathy in you, and so you know what it's like to feel less than. You know what it's like to be oppressed to in some way, shape, or form. So it's one where, like, yes, I don't know, I can't live your experience. I have my own type of experiences that I can, like, I've been hurt by people. I've been let down. I assume that those are like the feelings are the same. And so yes, it's like, yes, I was never targeted because of my race. I've been targeted because of something else. And so I think like the empathy piece is really important. Like, yes, you don't identify as XYZ, but you've felt those the same feelings that I felt. And did you feel good when you were belittled and berated and kicked out of school and targeted and all this? No. And so it's like, why do you think I would feel good about it? And why are you doing it to me? Or why do you think that's okay to do it to me when that shouldn't be done to you? So I think like that's where the empathy piece comes in. The generational piece, you were talking about that, like, and I think like 100 years ago, women's suffrage, and then in the Civil Rights Act of the 60s. And so it's like there, like every couple generations, like there's some progress that seems to be being made for like very large scale changes. And but again, it's like change is hard. People struggle with change all the time, but like it comes. And so you had said like your generation, more tolerance, more accepting, and that's what it's going to take. Like it seems like younger folks are like, okay, like live your life, be you, and so it's okay. But I think though, it's like if people say it's like, well, if my 94-year-old grandma can accept this, then your 50-year-old self has no excuse. And so
absolutely.
It's one of like age people are like, well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. So it's like it's hard to do this. It's like
that's
yes, exactly. And so it's like, you know what? Then I don't love that excuse.
Yeah, and that's my main. No, I mean it's not my main. It's one motivation for me. It's like I don't want to be the crusty old white guy that sits there and fucking. Because most of the discrimination takes place at a level that's nearly subliminal. You know what I mean? It's not people sitting around a table saying, "I hate gay people. I hate them." Yeah. You know, it's just more like little comments that are made, like with a look, with a look to the side or whatever between people that share a common understanding. And I guess one of the few things that I've tried to do is sort of call that out. You know, just acknowledge and call it out when it happens. Essentially, just make it clear. Like, I'm not there with you, man. You know, whether it be racism or whatever, it's like, nah.
Yeah. So the part of the growth is like knowing it and calling it, like acknowledging it yourself and be like, if you say something like this, or if you have those thoughts, being like, okay, I'm not a bad person because I still had this thought or I said this thing. I know it. I can be better. And so it's just like I can strive. Like what happened has happened. Let's move on and grow from it. And so like first like taking stock and looking at yourself, because again, it's always easy to be like, well, Lee, you suck because you said this and this, but I don't call myself out for this. So it's like I've got to be able to kind of own up to myself, like if I'm doing some of these behaviors. And then it's like, okay, how can I help someone else grow? Like if I'm not willing to do the work, why should I expect you to do the work?
Yeah, and what is the work? Facing your discomforts?
Yeah. So you talked about pronouns as well. So okay, and I know it's like that's something where I sometimes introduce myself with my pronouns, and I have it. I think I have it on my email signature at work, and with like Zoom meetings, I have it as like my name and then my pronouns there. Yeah. Because again, like you had talked about, like like being in a day, like feeling how you want to feel, and there are people that's like, well, on this day, I feel more masculine, more feminine, or more masculine or more feminine, like, and so it's like, and so that's where it's like. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's just like being yourself. And so like I've seen people like with their pronouns, it's like they, them, their, or like he, her, or like he, she, like he, they, them, like any level of pronoun, because it's a terrible feeling if you present a way and but you don't feel that way inside, and they start saying, well, he said this, because I'm using air quotes, they look that way, they look a certain way, but it's like that's not how they identify. And so that's where it feels like it's just it's a common courtesy to utilize someone's pronouns without assuming that because they present or they appear a certain way that's how you think they should be.
And for some reason I think that's something I need to explore. You know, like I said, I get a little bit of discomfort from it. I try not to be an asshole about it. I guess maybe, it seems like extra, but I mean, when you say it like that, that makes sense. And I also feel as though, like, I don't think it does anybody any good by jumping down people's throats too fast.
Correct.
And I'm sure that, like, we can agree on that. That, like,
Yeah.
I think that I don't want to feel terrified that I'm going to say the wrong thing to somebody. And for the most part, I don't. I have people in a lot of different communities I can kind of just talk to on a more intimate level and be like, all right, where are we at with this? But I think there is kind of a lot of fear that somebody's just going to attack you, for saying the wrong thing,
and I think there's a couple thoughts that I think with, like, if you're going to make mistakes, as you, I guess, if you pursue this journey of going out of your discomfort zone and learning, and, like, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to misgender someone. You're going to use the wrong acronym. You're going to use the wrong XYZ, and you're going to say something wrong. Like, I will guarantee you that you will. So just but how you react or how you rebound from that is, I think, as important. Because if you're like, well, I tried, I can't do it, and I give up, versus like, I'm sorry, I may have said the wrong thing. I'm learning. I'm growing in this experience.
Yeah.
Help, and then use that as a way to open the door and be like, okay, how do you identify? Okay, tell me more. And so, like, opening the door to, like, a good conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's just valuable. And you've alluded to this a few times that, like, we're all humans. We all need the same things. We all want that sense of belonging. And I've thought about that with regard to, the 15-year-old kid that gets thrown into, like, a white supremacy community. You know what I mean? It's like, he wanted community, and if a different community would have found him, that's where he would have been. But it was like, hey, you belong here, man. Come with us, And so I think even with people like that, it's like, it's horrifying, but it's not understandable. It is understandable. It's like, hey, you belong. We have this group. These are our beliefs, and you're one of us. Like, okay, I belong.
And I think this is, I feel like a different rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah, I just use that because it's something I thought of. I'm not,
No, I think it's like, the different rabbit hole that I'm going off of is, like, I think I'm right because of my experience, but someone who has grown up with this way and, like, believes they're right. And so I think that's where we get into it's just like, if this is all you know, this is what's right to you. And so, like, I think it's one where it's like, that kind of going back to, like, the respect thing. You belong to a community, and you're okay to live your life. Just don't mess up my life. Like, don't take away things that I can't live my life as a human. So I think it's one where it's like, when people are hell-bent on, I'm right, and this, like, and I'm not changing XYZ, you can adapt. But me adapting is like not being able to live my true self and my life, like, live my life. So I think that's one where it's like, yes, like, someone's going to be a part of a community and maybe grow and flourish and thrive. But it's like, don't hold me down just so that you can stay like elevated. Yeah,
and I guess where I was going with that is just to acknowledge, like, we all need the same things, and we all walk around with these deep insecurities. We're all just so afraid that somebody's going to reject us. Exactly what you were talking about. Like, it could just be done. Like, rejection is the thing that we're all afraid of. And I think it's just valuable to recognize, like, hey, we all want the same. It's just, if we can just, like, pull the veil back on that a little bit and be like, hey, I have feelings, you know what I mean, that can get hurt. And so do you. And so, like, let's just kind of do our best to not, And one thing I just saw yesterday, it's interesting because on the way down to the lodge, we had this conversation about a drag show that you went to. And I just saw yesterday, I think it was in Tennessee, there was a law that outlawed drag. I don't know if you've heard about that. Yeah. Was it Tennessee?
Yeah.
And when I see that, I think about it, and it's like, so that for the kids, that spontaneous drag won't corrupt some kids or some bullcrap, and it's, when I think about that, the reason for that law is that, like, that is such an identity flex that it's just terrifying that somebody could be comfortable enough with themselves to flex identities to that degree. You know what I mean? I think that, like, to the powers that be, a person that is able to do that and have that much style, that's scary.
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate that we're going that way of outlawing that stuff. It's like, man, what are you so afraid of?
Yeah. And so yeah, it's like I've seen some stuff on social media about that. And so it's like people just like I've been to drag shows, like they're fun. Like they're just enjoyable. And it's like good music, good dancing, good entertainment, good people, all of the good things. And so it's like like it hurts my heart to see stuff like this happen, where it's like this might be an only outlet for someone, for like to feel comfortable in their own skin and to be a part of something.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, now that's taken away. I was like, okay, that's sad. Like, it just doesn't feel right.
Have you ever reflected on that? Like the power of people being afraid of you? You know what I mean? Like the actual, like,
no,
like somebody's actually like afraid of me.
No,
just
I haven't.
Like you're relatively, I don't know if I'd say you're an innocuous guy, but you definitely don't seem to be like on the verge of attacking anybody. But it's just a funny concept of like that, you could strike fear deep into somebody's heart, which is wild.
And like, and without knowing, like me, just me being who I am, just trying to live my life and be happy is terrifying. And people are coming up with ways to not have me be so terrifying. That's, wow, I've got more power than I thought. I say sarcastically and facetiously. Oh man. But I guess, but sometimes it's like, okay, but no one ever shines a light, and it's like onto themselves, and it's like, why am I so afraid? What about this person is terrifying me to the core that I have to actively do things? I was like, so, but I'm always on the defensive, or because it's like stuff is coming against me, or it's like it feels like the marginalized populations always are on the receiving end of XYZ ick, and so it's like don't have time to kind of fulfill, self-actualize if I'm always trying to fight for basic needs and survival, or some of those other low levels of Maslow's.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm scary to people. My realization.
Right. Maybe to start playing offense, which that's kind of jokingly, but yeah, it is wild. And then at the end of the day, there are just such awesome spaces, that we're both able to share. And in this town in particular, like, not that it's like a perfect place, but it's like, I just really appreciate that it doesn't seem to be on the forefront of people's radars, in like in harmful ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's, I hope that's your experience in Stevens Point, because I know sometimes I feel a sense of like responsibility, like if I'm with my extended family and there's people like saying like racist or homophobic, I'm just like, no, not you, like not a member of my family, like you can't feel this way.
You know better. Why? How are you doing? How are you saying this? And I sometimes feel this with like get-togethers with family. I was like, that makes me sad. But it's like, I thought for someone, if you know me, like you know that like I identify in this as this population, and this is some of the things that you say. It's like, what? Or so that's like, that it feels weird that sometimes people say things, and again, sometimes just honest mistakes, correct them and move on. But it's like, I would say like in small town Stevens Point, or for some folks big town Stevens Point, right? But like I feel like it's a very safe community, for me. Like, and again, I can only speak from my experience. Like, I'm not the poster child for anything. Right. It's one, because like, I can only speak to my experience. But it's been a very positive one. I've felt like I've met people that help feel part of my chosen family, and some people that I care about and I would trust, or that I do trust. And so it's like I can surround myself with enough people. You have a way of acknowledging everybody, that I think is, well, thank you, just a gift, and I appreciate that. Just be like, wow, this person sees me and knows who I am and appreciates the fact that I'm here, and that's awesome, and I value having you as a friend, and I really appreciate you coming on and providing your insight, and it's gonna be good, and thanks for coming on. Oh, of course, it's my pleasure.